3.
I've been ready
2,
since I was born, man.
1. Welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Midnight Charette podcast, hosted by myself, David Lee, and Marina Bourderonnet. We are the first ever design variety show, and today we're doing a how-to guide on interviewing, not how to conduct an interview, but how to be a good interviewee, right? That's what we're doing. And if you're interested in finding out how to create a good portfolio for applying to various jobs, or maybe a resume also, or how to apply, because it's not as straightforward as many might think, then you should also listen to our previous episodes about that. If you go to our website, midnightcharette.com, there are different categories of episodes. We have a category called Tips and Tactics. Click on that and it'll take you to all the shows we've done that provide more directly useful information. And we have a hotline for designers and architects to call. That number is 213-222-6950. And we've also done a number of recordings where we answer questions from listeners. And those, I have to say, those have probably been my favorites, one of my favorites so far. Right.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I feel like we actually are useful to somebody.
Yeah, and we've actually gotten some other listeners reaching out in response to other listeners who left voicemails on the hotline, which is kind of cool. Also, I want to give a shout out to Study Architecture. Study Architecture is a website. It is studyarchitecture.com. They are an organization founded, put on, hosted, created by the ACSA, the American Collegiate Schools of Architecture, something like that. They're the they are the organization for architecture at the university level, and they have a website and they provide all kinds of useful helpful information for young aspiring architects, and we are listed on there. Our tips and tactics episodes are listed on there as well. But shout out to them because they are a really good resource. I think they're relatively new. They didn't exist when we were in school. So anyone... Huh?
They did. They host competitions too, right?
The ACSA... ACSA is a really big organization. They do a bunch of different stuff, and Study Architecture is one part of it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I don't think Study Architecture does
subdivision of the big one.
Kind of, yeah.
Got it.
But they have really great material. Also, a shout out to Archinect, the place that you should definitely go to as a website if you are trying to find which firms are hiring, if you're trying to learn, again, more information about architecture and how to navigate your way through this crazy career. And they have a really profound forum. But their job board is a big...
It's the first place you should look for jobs. Yeah,
absolutely. And they're good people too. And they have their own coffee. They have a pop-up store every now and then. They do events. They're
pretty engaged in the community.
Yeah. And they're nice. They're nice people too. We like to help support nice people.
I just want to point out your tearing skills. Like, I've been given notes to do this recording.
Behind the scenes, don't reveal.
And this is the tearing skills of David Lee. He made a fold before, so just so you know how handy this man could be.
That shows you how that's my model making skills right there.
Wow,
it's
shit,
6 years of school. It's 7 years of school, actually. Okay, and let's see, what else is there? Okay. Oh, Michael Rasik is another person. I know we got a lot of people to give shout outs to, but he is also known as a young architect. He has made it his life mission and his career goal to help young aspiring designers become architects. And he has conferences. He did his first conference this last year, and it was amazing. And he's doing another one this following year in Portland, Maine.
Yep.
He's fixated with Portland. I don't know what that's about. I have to ask him.
I wonder if he decided to do Portland, Maine to kind of like East Coast, West Coast.
Maybe. Yeah. Probably. And... But he also has a very powerful boot camp for passing the AREs, the Architects Registration Exams. So you should definitely check out his website and him. Just look him up. He's everywhere on social media.
And we will probably do a recording about AREs and talk a little more in depth about that boot camp and other places and resources. So just stay tuned on the tips and tactics.
The final two people we want to give shout outs to are our sponsors, NAAD, NOD is the name of the company, and their website is naadme.com. They are an online retailer, right? And what's special about these people?
They are promoting designers and products from North Africa and the Middle East, trying to find the emerging talents of those regions. They have very beautiful things, very unique. You can buy it online. If you're in Paris right now, you can also go to their pop-up store happening until November 16. Show them some support, and if you use the code MIDNIGHT when you shop online, you get 15% off. Pretty good.
And also, if you're an architect, very likely if you're listening to this episode, you should check out the program ArchiCAD by Graphisoft. ArchiCAD is a BIM program. It is very robust, it's fast, and what we like about it is that it's easily scalable for different offices. So if you're a small office and you've been wanting to get into BIM software and that process, that workflow, but you're kind of hesitant because Revit is a really challenging program to use. ArchiCAD is a great solution because they have a great support team and their interface is much more architect friendly that we found. And there's a lot of other great things about them. Go check out episode 136 where we discuss BIM programs in that one. All right, is that all the introduction stuff we have to do?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, let's get into it. So before even getting to the interview, it seems like there is some preparation work that needs to happen, right? To avoid like things that could disturb you the day off, that could have been avoided with a little bit of planning and organization. And I think that's not to neglect because you want to be as best as you can that day. So on that note, be prepared.
Yeah, and that's a very generic thing, and I think it's we also have to say that the interview is probably the most important aspect of the hiring process. Maybe it's second to the portfolio, but they're right next to each other. You kind of have to have both to get hired if you're the employer knows what they're looking for. So there's a few basic things in terms of preparation that you could try to do. The first is that you always want to have you want to interview at the offices you don't care about first, because most of the time when we go to interview for a job, it's been a bit of some while since we've done this, and we're not used to it, right? We have to go back and redo the portfolio, redo the resume.
It's a warm-up, right? It's like you go running, the first few miles are not going to be the best, but the last ones you're going to be better at it.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have a list of firms that you like the most and you only want to apply there, I don't recommend that. I still think you should apply to other places and line up those interviews first if you can. Scheduling doesn't always work out, but do it if you can, because the first one you do is probably not going to be very great. But if you get to go through that process 4 or 5 times, well, by the 5th time for sure, you're going to be a pro at it.
So are you saying to just, for example, go on ArchiNext's website and look at the firms and see the ones that you really don't care about working there?
No, I don't mean to apply to ones you absolutely don't care about, but I think a lot of architects, especially once they get older, and especially if they have egos, they only apply to the jobs they absolutely want. And it's kind of like make or break. It's either all or nothing for them. And maybe in the final decision making of where you go, that's how you're going to think about it. And I totally get that, right? Like if either I work at this office, Zaha Hadid if you want to be there, or I don't, period. Still worthwhile to apply to other places for practice and also for negotiating, right? It increases your value.
Of course, but I mean, if you're going to interviews while you're working, it's like more time you have to like squeeze in your work days.
Right. So that's a really challenging thing. And so in scheduling, you don't want to schedule your interview right before lunch. Anytime around like 11 or 12. Well, 11's pretty good, but like 12, bad idea. Everyone's hungry and it's just not a good spot to be in. Same thing for giving presentations. You don't want to be the first, you don't want to be the last, you don't want to be right before lunch. It's good to be right after lunch, right? Because everyone's full of Chipotle or whatever.
I actually don't mind being the first.
And presenting or interviewing?
Both.
Because you're one of those overachiever students. Get out of here.
No, but because they have no one else they could compare you to.
Yeah.
Think about that.
I don't know. You want the audience, your audience, whether it be a jury or the interviewer, to be warmed up and awake and stuff like that. If they're a legit office and the partners are on top of their game, they're gonna be awake and alert. But I'd rather get someone at like 10:30 after they've had coffee and kind of have settled into the flow of the day. And I definitely don't want to talk to them, the meeting right before they're waiting to go on their lunch break. So that's try to schedule that way. I think you bring up a good point, though, that if you're working, which most of us are when we're applying to a new job, this is something you really have to consider, because if you suddenly mark in your office calendar that you're out of the office, over the next 3 weeks, like twice a week for the next 3 weeks, it's very likely anyone who has access to the calendar will know that you're interviewing, and they might even ask you, like, are you thinking of leaving?
Actually, that happened to me not very long ago, when I actually had to go see a physical therapist, a couple times a week. And as much as I could, I would schedule it right before going to work. So from like 8:30 to 9:30. So just show up in the morning, like half an hour late. But sometimes, like she couldn't, or like she was running late. And so I would show up like a little later, or would have to go like by the end of the day or something. And it was a few times a week. So at some point we were walking back from a site visit with my project manager, and he's like, Marina, I noticed that you've been having a lot of appointments lately. Are you looking for a job?
Right.
I was like, no, dude, I actually have, health conditions that I need to take care of. He actually didn't believe me, so I had to go on about like what I have and whatever.
And that's totally understandable, because we've all seen that happen.
You gotta be smart, and I don't know that you necessarily want to tell them that you're looking for a job, right?
No, you don't.
So there is multiple ways, right? You could either schedule it. I know you said not being the first one in the morning to interview, but if it's easier to show up half an hour or an hour later in the morning because of your current job, that's okay. And maybe do that for the offices that you don't care so much about, right? Schedule those then. Your lunch break, well, maybe,
break.
You take a later lunch break,
right,
and your lunch break is actually your interview time,
right?
And you just snack on your way there and on your way back. Or you have a dentist appointment. There's a lot of dentist appointment,
right,
but try to like space out the various reasons. Or you just, you take half a day off and you go to 3 interviews that day.
That might be tough to schedule. I don't know if I'd recommend that. That's tough.
Maybe tough, and sometimes interview get rescheduled. So, there is some variables in play.
Within, interviewing and getting to the interview is a very different experience depending on the place that you're living. But in an urban setting like New York City, it requires planning. If the interview is at 2 p.m., depending on where it is, you have to allot 40 minutes to get there because the subways are inconsistent, or there's traffic, or you have to assume that something's going to go wrong, because it always does, and allow an extra like 20 minutes. And typically when you interview, you wear something nicer than you do at your everyday, as your everyday wardrobe, right? And so what that means is that you also can't show up to your office and be like, oh, I have to be out today and then tomorrow, and I'm dressing up extra nice these 2 days. So very likely you have to pack a change of clothes and to find a place to change, because a lot of offices are really, really casual, like t-shirts, jeans,
well, you
and
don't
sneakers.
dress up the same when you've been hired and when you're trying to get hired.
Exactly.
It's, without going like tie and suit.
So once you've gone through the interview process a few times, you'll kind of understand this and get this down. But if you're coming right out of the gate, like, these are legitimate things you have to think about. Because if you have, for me, right, you have a pair of dress shoes. I never wear dress shoes at the office. Long socks, again, I don't wear those. Nicer pants, never wear those. A dress shirt, never wear that. Maybe even a sports coat, don't wear that either. And a belt. Okay, that's a lot of stuff to carry. Where am I going to put it, right? So I remember trying to time... I remember sneaking off to the office bathroom, which is in the hallway because it was shared amongst other offices, and trying to figure out when the partners were going to be out and when the studio directors were going to be out. So it wasn't clear that I came out of the bathroom and looked different. And I did get caught once with this giant ass backpack. Like, where are you going? Oh, I got a big UPS thing I got to drop off, and it maybe some of these things are very like kind of detailed, but like you have to think about this, and because you don't want them to know that you're interviewing for sure. Because once that becomes known, that's it. There's no going back. You're a different person to them in the office. But
I think the transportation aspect and how much time you need to get to where you are and to your destination for your interview is important. In New York, there is, constraint and same time like advantages, because you can still walk places or like jump on a cab or do things.
Yeah.
If you're in LA and you have to drive on the west side or like the opposite direction, that's a pretty chunk of time that you have to save just for that. So it's big part of the scheduling. But if you have a car, you just leave your stuff in the trunk and no one knows, and you change in your car. Right? So.
In terms of what you should wear, I think this is a common question. For the profession of architecture, for men, I think slacks, dress shoes, socks, no socks, it doesn't matter either way. Belt, no belt, doesn't really matter. A nice button-down shirt, and with throw in a sports coat. You don't have to do a tie. It's not really necessary.
No, don't do it. Especially if you're young, don't do a tie.
If you want to do a tie, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to make or break the deal. Because the thing is, if you're on the younger side, let's assume, and you wear a tie, you're a little overdressed, no employer is going to be like, well, he's wearing a tie, he doesn't know how to interview, he doesn't know what he's doing, he's trying to impress me. I'm going to dock points from his, chart because of this. They won't. They'll be like, okay, well, trying a little bit hard. He's fresh out of school, but I get it.
They won't, but you're going to come out as young and kind of inexperienced because you didn't think that,
It's fine.
Don't do a tie.
It's fine. It's fine.
Nah, don't do a tie.
But I would wear something that's not too loud. You need to pick out something that's going to match the vibe of the office, and so I wouldn't do something too wacky. Yeah. I don't know what it's like for women. It's a little bit different. Pantsuit?
Women, I would say avoid, showing cleavage and wearing like short dresses and whatever. Like
that's an interesting advice.
Like you don't want. I mean, if you want to get hired on those criteria, sure, like go for it. But that wouldn't be my first advice. I would say makeup, go like not too like crazy on it, or like just try to be tasty. Try to be as put together as you can.
Tasteful. Tasty is like
tasteful, tasty is the same thing. Do your hair, like don't wake up and like use your like bedhead style.
Well, you need to
brush your teeth. Brush your teeth, mouthwash, like mouthwash it right before you go in, because there's nothing worse than being stuck in a room like facing someone and having to like inhale their bad breath for like 15, 30 an hour. So you don't want to be that person,
right?
And at least if the other person didn't brush their teeth, it's going to smell like mint a little bit in the room.
Right. You don't want to be dressed up or covered up too much, because you need transparency. They need to see who you are, and a person, when they go to make a hiring decision, it's partly based on how well I think I know the actual person. Everyone understands that the interview persona is slightly different from the actual person. We get that. But you still need to let that shield be, somewhat porous so we can see to who you are. And if you show up with clown face and all this stuff, it's like, I don't quite understand who I'm hiring actually, because I don't fully believe you're going to show up every day like this. So there's a kind of level of almost honesty that comes with how much makeup and other stuff you're wearing. Okay, so that's it. And then cologne. Don't wear cologne. I just wouldn't wear any at all, because some people they don't care for it.
I wear some every day, like a fragrance, but pick one that's like light enough and neutral enough that people won't get headaches or start sneezing when on your portfolio. You don't want that.
Okay,
but I have to say that, at least for me, wearing some perfumes or like some kind of fragrance can calm me down, right? Like when I used to go to take my ARE exams, I would wear sunscreen on me, because the smell of sunscreen reminds me of the beach, and I feel comfortable and I feel good wearing it.
Right.
What are you laughing at?
That's interesting.
So, I mean, it doesn't need to be like a perfume. It could just be like a hand lotion that whenever you move your hand, you smell it, it like calms you down.
Victoria's Secret, like sexual desires.
What?
I don't know. What are you? I don't know.
No, but something to consider. Sometimes it's the small things.
Okay. When I was a kid, I wanted to wear cologne because I wanted to be grown up, but there wasn't any around, so I wore my sister's like bubblegum scent. I was like, well, if I smell like a girl, maybe I'll attract girls. Didn't really work out. I think I was like 6 also. Okay, so moving on to a little more sophisticated, complicated things. The research. Research the office, yada, yada, yada. You need to know actually the different people that you're going to be interviewing with. Research them, obviously. Also research anyone in the office you might want to meet. who you aren't scheduled to meet,
or someone that you might know that's there and you don't know about.
Well, that's a good. Yes. That's a yeah. You also have to figure that part out too. Any kind of connections you might have that you're unaware of by one degree of separation, because it's a very small community, so it's actually very likely you're going to know someone who was in there,
like one of the founding partners who grew up in Paris. Well, from France. Well, I definitely have to insist on that. Like small thing. Yeah, the prep work is super important,
because the thing is, when you go there, you want to be able to immediately recognize like a spy mission, who all the big players are. And if you can try and figure out who holds the power and who is going to be more in line with you before you get there, that's really great, because you'd be kind of surprised when you get to because most offices are pretty open and there's a lot of people walking around and stuff. You're going to cross paths with a lot of people that are not the two that you're interviewing with, in the hallway, in the bathroom, at the reception. And if you know their names, you know who they are, it's a really good thing if you can quickly say hi or strike a conversation, especially if they have something in common with you. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for a way in. So if you went to the same school, right? If you had the same teachers, if they also studied abroad at this particular program, these are like fantastic things to know. For random meetings, and also especially for the interview itself. That way you know how to shape and tone what you say to the people that are sitting across from you. It's all about knowing your audience.
I have to say though that sometimes you get an interview scheduled by the receptionist or whoever is in charge, the PA of the boss or whoever. Mm-hmm. You don't always know who you're going to have for the interview. Yep. And sometimes the office itself doesn't know exactly who's going to do the interview until the day of.
Yeah,
but it doesn't hurt to ask them, like, can you tell me who I would be interviewing with?
Oh, yeah, no, 100%.
It's totally a legitimate question to ask before an interview.
As soon as the interview is offered, you ask them, and I would ask them again even the day before to see, in case they switch it up, which is super likely. And that reminds you, when you go in to the interview room, do not assume that everyone or anyone entering that space has seen your resume or portfolio before.
Probably won't.
Don't assume it. And I've read and heard some people kind of, voice their concern or surprise, like this person doesn't seem to know, who I am, or they're asking me basic questions that's on my resume. Well, one, it's because they might have not seen it, especially that's the case for bigger offices. Two, they're going to ask you about your resume. One, I mean, just as a
conversation starter.
just a starter, to see also if you're honest in your resume, to see if you know what you wrote down, to see if you can speak clearly, and to hear. There's another dimension that's brought to the table. To
get more information. That happened to my sister recently. Right, she interviewed, and she was pissed after the interview because she was like, "Yeah, the lady kept asking me questions, and everything's on my resume." I'm like, well, a one-liner describing like a 3-year experience, that actually doesn't say much about what you've been doing. Yeah. So it's completely normal and natural for people to ask about those experiences just to find out a little bit more about you.
Also, you have to make a list of the key points that you want to get across in the interview. Interviews last somewhere between half an hour, average, let's say. And so basically, you have to think of it almost... It is a presentation. It's like a stand-up set or something. You have a set time and you have these 6 points that you want to get across. So you have to know those 6 points, like the back of your hand. They have to be memorized. They have to be rehearsed enough so that when you're in there, you can gauge time and you know when to throw them in, and you can manipulate them and improvise a little bit so it sounds natural. But it's the same thing as like when you're doing your portfolio. Again, you should go back and listen to our portfolio recording if you haven't, because it ties directly into this stuff. There's a number of key things you're trying to get across, and that's the same thing for the interview. So you have to know that beforehand. And this would include your, basically anything that makes you hireable, right? So it's not just your design skills, it's not just your technical skills, but it extends also to your teamwork skills, your leadership skills, your organization skills. Some of these other things we don't quite think about, especially younger designers who haven't had project management experience. We don't think about the non-design, non-technical things because... I don't know, maybe because we're so focused on just the work itself. But I'm telling you, these other aspects, which really almost have nothing to do with architecture or design itself, are a huge part of whether or not someone's going to be hireable, right? Because offices are like families, small offices are like small families, and they need everyone to get along. So you could be the best designer in the world and have all these stats and awards and stuff, but if you come in and you're speaking gibberish and you don't exhibit these other kinds of skills, it's going to really hurt your chances of getting hired anywhere good, I think. Anywhere good, because you don't want to be surrounded by people like that. Let's see.
And actually, I used to, about the 4 points you were mentioning, or like the points that you were mentioning. I remember every time I would go to an interview, like the day before, I would kind of like make a list of the things I want to say about my portfolio, the thing I want to say during the interview, like just bullet points, keywords that I can like remember. And on every time I would go to an interview, on my way there, I would kind of like read that cheat sheet before going in.
Yep.
Like an exam, like you're trying to like remember the stuff that doesn't stick like the last minute. Well, kind of do that too.
Yeah, totally.
And it makes you feel a little more confident going in. Yeah. Right? You have an agenda you're going in with. You're not just like going in and see how it goes.
Yeah, and this brings us to the next section in our outline, which is before the interview. So always get there early. Just don't show up. Yeah, I'm going to Tarantino that. Always get there early. Do not show up late. It's a bad look across the board. And some employers are like, if you show up late, I don't hire you, which I think is kind of bullshit, but still don't be late. In fact, you want to get there so early that you're able to go across the street to the local library or cafe, sit down for a moment, because if you think about it, if you've been hustling in your office, you're getting changed in a bathroom stall that's too small, you're throwing all these weird clothes you don't typically wear, it's more clothing than you usually wear, you're sweating, and then you get there at the interview 5 minutes before you're supposed to go on stage. No. Get there 15, 20 minutes beforehand, get an iced coffee, get an iced water, sit, cool down. Heat is a big problem for me. Yeah,
don't drink coffee. Don't drink too much liquid before you go in, because if the interview lasts for a while, you don't want to be like, I need to pee, right? So, but you want to be able to sit down your face, put some deodorant, like use some mouthwash, and that's a relax, stretch.
And that's the perfect time also to, as you said, go over your notes. You have to have notes taken. And this also ties back into the portfolio and the resume. The resume and portfolio, those act as the long version of everything you're going to potentially say, and then you have a short list of things, which is a basically bullet point summary of the resume and portfolio. So the key points that I was talking about, the key points that you need to list and know you want to get across, those don't exist only in your mind. They exist on paper, and they exist also in the portfolio and possibly even the resume. It all ties together, right?
Do you think it's weird to have like a little notebook with like a few things written down and have that on the table with you when you go over your portfolio? Just as like, when you have a client's presentation, you never rarely just like go live on the moment. You prepared for it, and do you think that makes sense, or do you think it's kind of like...
It's a good question. This is
you should be able to just talk about it without that.
This is the same thing as when you give a presentation, right? Is it okay to have note cards or not? And this is like a common question students have. Can I have note cards? So let's talk ideally. Ideally, no, you don't have note cards. You fucking just go out there and you do your thing. You know everything. It's off the cuff, and it's improvised. It feels improvised. It's natural. It's all that stuff. Great. If you're not a person who feels comfortable doing that, not because of a lack of preparedness, but because it's just not in you, I think having notes is totally fine. And I tell this, and the same thing, I would say this to a student presenting. Yeah, have notes. It's not a problem. If you read the notes, then it's a problem, right? Yeah. At a certain level.
But if that can help, calm you down, like being stress-free and do a good job presenting your portfolio, it's acceptable.
I think it's acceptable. The problem is that most of the time when we write things down, and this happens to many people, you have a presentation of some kind, an interview is included in that, you have your notes, right? Bullet points. It's not, you don't have long sentences because you won't be able to read long sentences, so you have bullet point notes. You get to the moment. What happens, you look down at your note card and like the words are in German all of a sudden, and you're like and then you go completely off script because the nerves come into play. And it has happened to me. It happens to a lot of people.
German.
You keep swearing. Ooh, guten Tag. Yeah. I mean, if you're German, then I think it works. But if you're not German, that's a problem.
You have to see what you think works best for you. And
you can have the notes, but assume that when it comes game time, you're going to look down and it won't mean anything to you because you're going to be a little bit nervous.
And that's when, if you need the notes to do your portfolio, really you should listen to our portfolio episode, because if you're smart enough,
I already plugged it like 3 times.
Well, you put those keywords and those things in strategic places, characters and fonts.
This is what I'm saying. So because
your flashcards are hidden within your portfolio, and only you can see it.
We will get to the port that in a moment. Okay, so let's see. Arrive early. The other thing too is, so you're in the cafe, right? You're all set. You're just like 5 minutes to go. Okay, I'm going to walk across the street. I'm going to assume I don't get hit by a bus crossing the street. You have to think that from the moment you enter the site, the parking lot of the building you're getting into, or entering the vestibule, you are interview ready, period. Right?
No chewing gum, no calling your mom. This is not.
There are many times when I've gone to an interview, and in the beginning I thought, okay, right, I'm entering the building. I'm kind of disheveled still. Like my stuff is kind of unorganized. I'm gonna figure it out when I get there. Bad idea, because what happens in a lot of, for example, New York buildings, you go through the lobby, you get in the elevator, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna do my stuff in the elevator. Not enough time. Elevator door opens, and some of the offices don't even have a vestibule or hallway. It's boom, office. There's Peter Eisenman sitting there, and I'm in the thing going like this, and then the doors close. That's not the greatest thing, not the greatest impression to leave.
How am I not surprised to hear this?
That is a true story. Also, I did apply to Peter Eisenman's office. The fucking office doesn't have any kind of foyer or there's no procession. The doors just open, and I'm beady eyes are staring at me. I'm like, this is not good. I have to come back. Hello, Mr. Eisenman. I'm very keen to work at your office. I did not work there.
Yeah, I would put your resume in your portfolio, have your portfolio in your hands. If you take the elevator, you might be taking the elevator with the people you're interviewing with, or people who are going to that floor. So you don't want to do it in the elevator, right?
It all needs to be ready to go. And the portfolio, if it's a nice booklet, this nice object that you've created, it needs to be protected, which means you can't just throw in a book bag with like pens and pencils and all this kind of crap. It needs to be protected, which means then you need to take it out, and everything needs to be lined up and ready to go, as you're saying, before you even enter the building.
And remember who you've been in touch with through email. So when you get to the front desk, you're like, I've been in touch with this person. I have this appointment at this time with so-and-so. Because sometimes they're not super organized, or they forgot about you, or you got to reschedule. You don't know. So
and
you got to know.
This is also where knowing all the different faces and the backgrounds of people is really important. When you get there, you're going to meet hopefully a receptionist. You're going to chit-chat with him or her, and the receptionist, and we've pointed this out in a previous recording about how to apply for jobs, the receptionist, the HR, these kinds of people, not the architecture design people, the administrative people, are super, super important to someone trying to get a job, because they have access to key partners that the average person in the office does not. They can influence the partners in the right way. They can also get you through. Let me put it this way. If you think about applying to a job where you don't know anyone there, think about that's one situation. Now, it's the same office, except for you are best friends with the receptionist and best friends with HR. That is really good. And the receptionist, HR, sometimes they're kind of one and the same, is because they will be able to push your things through to the right person and make sure that you get seen and you get the time that you need and hopefully deserve, right? A lot of stuff gets lost in the process because there's many things happening in an office, and some 25-year-old applying is just not at the top of their list, right? So,
and make sure to catch the name of the receptionist you're meeting the day of the interview, because maybe they have multiple receptionists, or maybe you're going to have to reach out to follow up with them, and she's or he's going to be the person you're going to be in touch with. So knowing their name, the fact that you will remember their name once you reach out, means a lot to people.
It means a lot, and if you can strike up a conversation while you're waiting, that's even better. And if it's a friendly conversation, they like you, that's great. Oh, hey, it's David's calling back again. Yeah, I remember you. We talked about, I don't know,
pain au chocolat and
or
cheese.
Whatever. Yeah. Oh, yeah, your portfolio. I can help you out, right? As opposed, if they don't even know who you are and you never bother to talk to them, why would they care? Why would they care? So that's super important. And the other thing I like to do whilst I'm waiting, is I always ask where the bathroom is. I go to the bathroom, and I again cool down, use the bathroom, wash my hands, look in the mirror, make sure that I'm kind of all ready to go. And this sounds silly, but I will also, if the bathroom's empty, I will stretch my arms out and do like a big breath and be like, like that, because there is this. I know it sounds odd, but there is a physiological thing that happens with us human beings and even apes. They do this stretching of the chest and arms out it's a way of, it builds confidence. You only do that if you feel confident,
or even just a deep breathing, before you need the bathroom.
Chest out. Because if you're like this is the opposite of confidence. You don't want to sit like this for the interview and you're waiting for the interview. One, because if they see you like this, it doesn't inspire, surety or sureness. But if you go to the bathroom, you kind of stretch and you're like, okay, it's game time. You come out, you're going to...
Just pack some weights in your backpack. Do some lifting, some boxing against the door.
Unfold the total gym, get a good pump on. Chuck Norris would approve. All right. That's all that stuff, right?
Well, you had a few things about
what to bring.
Things to bring.
And this reminds me, we had a person write in, and he or she asks, what
should I bring with me?
Right. Well, there's a little... Okay.
Do we have the same questions?
Yes. He says, hi, my question is about interviews is, what should I bring with me? Rolls of drawings, photos, extra information about projects in my portfolio, extra copies of everything to hand out. I don't want to look silly with bags of extra stuff, just so I'm prepared. Thank you.
Well, that's a good point. You don't want to show up like you're going on a trip, right? So no rolling suitcase, like minimum things that you have to carry, because you're going to have to shake hands to say hi. So one hand can be busy, the other one needs to be free. Mm-hmm. And if you're looking for things, you can have like 5 different bags. Like that's it looks messy, right? Things to bring.
Where's my list?
I would say bring extra copies of your portfolio and your resume.
I say bring 2 copies of the portfolio. You have to be prepared to leave one behind. If you can't afford it, then I get it. But if you can, you want something to be able to leave behind. Sometimes they will ask, and sometimes they won't. But if they ask, you want to be able to leave one behind. You
print as many resumes as you have, because why not?
I would have at least 5. One for you to look at, which might get crumpled up because you're using it for notes. One to give to the person across from you. And I've been in interviews where I was scheduled for like 3 people. Okay, I'll bring 4 resumes. Then like another person shows up and another person shows. And if you have a crowd of 6 people or 7 people, which I've had, you don't have to have resumes for all 7, but you do want to. I think if you have, at the very minimum, you didn't have 2 for 2 people. Other than yourself. 3 is better, is my opinion. Because what happens is a lot of times an interview will start, someone else comes in late, right? And the resume might be sitting in the middle of a giant-ass conference table, and they might not have the I don't know, is it the confidence or the wherewithal or the management skills, I think, to just ask, can I have his resume? They're just sit in the corner and think like, I don't know, maybe I won't ask. And you don't want that. You definitely don't want that.
The resume is basically your business card at this point. Mm-hmm. So, you shouldn't be greedy on how many you bring with you, because as many people as possible can have it, the better it is for you to be seen and be remembered. As far as like rolls of drawings and extra stuff about your projects, I wouldn't bother, to be honest. I mean, your portfolio should be good enough that you don't need to have that. If they want extra things, then you follow up with an email and you email it to them. Mm-hmm.
I would say...
But I wouldn't.
You don't need to bring rolls of drawings. What I would do is print out 11 by 17 set, not a full set. Just
samples of work.
Yeah, exactly. So your portfolio probably won't be 11 by 17 because it's too big. It'll be in the 8.5 by 11 range, let's say. And the portfolio, typically you wouldn't use the portfolio booklet to showcase like a bunch of technical drawings. It just doesn't quite work, right? So if you do want to show your technical drawing experience, it's fine to have it, but 11 by 17 is more than enough, and it doesn't have to be the whole set. Just a little bit of everything on the pages that have the most ink. That solves that problem. Photos, I don't quite know what it means. If you have some kind of photography experience or experience doing other creative things.
Well, if you have,
I'd say put it in your portfolio and you solve that problem.
Photos, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, samples of work, having additional, like, more technical drawings, maybe that you can, like, show them so they see, you know, like, the level of complexity that you're comfortable with. Like, why not?
And if you have, you know, sometimes there's, like, marketing booklets that developers will do, and if you had a part in that, or you feel like it communicates something that's pertinent to the interview in the office, like there's I don't know, a booklet about a hotel, right? And you're applying for hotel design, and there's a really nice booklet that explains to the hotel customers what the hotel's about. Then that's fine.
I actually remembered a few times I went with an iPad and I did put more photos about projects, because you select only a few to make it in your portfolio. You can't have everything, right? But I actually had a folder with, like, more stuff that kind of didn't make it into the portfolio, but I thought if they're more interested into these, I could show them more images.
Did that ever happen?
I think it did a couple times.
Yeah, it's not bad. You don't want to...
But you have to know where your stuff is. So, you know, you might want to, like, make albums or organize them in a way that if you're looking for one thing, you can find it very quickly.
Digital things are always really awkward in the moment when, you know, the microsecond matters. You don't want to be fumbling with, like, a password that or whatever,
like,
and you can't find it. It doesn't
you
load.
don't need internet. You know, think about those things.
I could see that working. You just want to... I don't know. More is not necessarily always better. You still want to curate the stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Don't want, because you want them to see only the best things.
But like, let's say you're applying to an office and you're thinking, okay, they do mostly residential projects, so they're going to hire me to do residential. So here is my portfolio, like all of my experience focusing on the residential. Then you show up at the interview and they're actually thinking of hiring you to work on a retail project, and they don't have anyone, right?
Right.
And you have that experience, but because you didn't think about that, you don't necessarily have much into your portfolio.
Right.
Well, you're like, well, give me a second. I can actually show you some of my retail work that I've done before. Then you pull out the iPad and show some slideshows.
And I think all of that is packable, so you won't be having, as he says, silly bags. You won't look silly with bags of extra stuff. That's not going to happen. Rolls of drawings you don't need to bring. What else? If you're young, business card. You don't really need a business card. Doesn't really make sense. The resume has your information on it. And I always bring a handkerchief, again, because tissue. I am sweaty.
I bring tissue, like you don't want to blow your nose when you're interviewing.
I don't bring tissue because then it sticks all over the face. Then you have like tissue.
How much sweat do you make?
Hey man, the New York summer is brutal. All right, moving right along. Okay, now we get to the interview itself. This is how long have we been going for?
45 minutes.
We might have to make this a two-parter.
Ooh.
Yeah, which I hate to do for people listening. I know it's frustrating, but
well.
No, we should get into the. We should get into this a little bit at least. Okay, so the interview. Let's say you enter the conference room. You got to pick a seat that makes sense, and you don't know
if you get to choose.
If you get to choose, yeah, obviously, if you get to choose, you pick the seat.
If they give you a seat, you're like, no, I'm sorry, can I sit over
there? Okay. Well, if that's how you want to go about it, then you probably don't deserve to get hired. Pick a seat that makes sense, and I guess, I don't know if I have the answer to that actually, now that I say that out loud, but sometimes the conference table is huge, and if you're interviewing with two people, it's like really awkward to be like, 10 feet away from someone. So sometimes what I'll do is kind of sit at the corner of the table, which will allow them to sit also at the corner, but the other side. And we're like much closer then, as a little more amicable. Okay, so the portfolio, again, is when it gets to that part of the interview. All interviews, basically, you come in, they say, okay, tell us about yourself. You talk about basically what's on your resume and some stories for a little bit. Then jump right into the portfolio. And the portfolio is the thing that structures your entire presentation and this entire portion of the interview, which is roughly 80% of it. And you have to be super prepared. You have to know everything in the portfolio really well, too. You can't, because you have to be ready for them to flip to a random page and be like, okay, tell me about this. Not only just tell me about this, but I want to know, tell me the technical things. Tell me the team that was on it. Tell me how the design. Explain the design to me. And you might be thinking, well, I didn't fucking design this. Like, that wasn't my role in the job. I was the manager or whatever it was, So you have to be ultra prepared with every single aspect of the portfolio.
And that's why I think when we talk at the beginning, like be prepared with transportation, scheduling, and all of that stuff, rehearsing the portfolio presentation is a big one. And I would, grab your girlfriend, your mom, your dad, your best friend, like spend a couple hours like going through the portfolio in different ways, have them just flip through and then stop and ask you a question, or have them just you go and present each project after each other. Take notes, because oftentimes you get ideas when you start thinking about this project, not necessarily the same as the one when you write about it. So rehearse the presentation of the portfolio. Don't think that because you've done it, you know it, you can just wing it. It would help you find the right words at the moment you have to present it.
And the reason why also you want to go through the most of the time, they're not going to flip to a random page and just ask you questions about it. Although that
happened to me many times.
It can happen. But most of the time, it's like, okay, tell us, show us a few projects from your portfolio, which reminds me that it's always a good idea to ask how much time you have. I know saying it out loud at an interview might seem silly, and it might seem you're being over controlling, but it's really, you have to know. If you
am I going to present every single project? Do I present only one or two?
I've had interviews that have lasted under 30 minutes, and they've been great. I've had ones under 30 minutes that have been mediocre, we call it, and I've had ones that lasted up to 2 hours. So I think it's worthwhile to ask them.
Well, and the thing too is that you want to be in that room as long as you can. Right. And if you don't want to go over your portfolio too quickly, because then the discussion topics are limited, and therefore the time that you have left in this room got shortened because of you, right? So knowing, okay, we have half an hour for the interview, we just started, so think like you can go on for 20 minutes and then 10 minutes of chit chat.
The interview is a challenging thing because it's a give and take, and you have to be open and receptive to what they're saying and respond to it. But again, you have that list of major things you want to get across. And so typically, right, here's your portfolio. Tell us about your work, and you flip through it, right? This is why each project has to have a very specific reason for existing in the portfolio. It's the A team of things, not A team of projects, A team of aspects that make you hireable. So when you get to each one, you're telling them those main key points, and you are the one that's structuring the conversation. You don't let them be like, oh, okay, so let's discuss the theoretical concepts of this project. It's like, bro, this was done in Revit. I'm clearly showing you for Revit skills. It has nothing to do with conceptual thinking for like the project that was done on no budget. Right. So that's why you have to, most interviewers suck, okay? Most people suck at interviewing, and they suck at being interviewees, and they're not good at giving presentations. You have to be the one to take control and direct them down the path that you want. So you have to basically make them a good interviewer in a way, because instead of relying on them asking good questions, you're just going to answer the questions for them in advance.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you are the one who should be running the interview if you're doing good. But so I think preparing yourself about different ways to go about presenting your portfolio. All right, first one, you're talking very briefly about each project, like in a couple sentences. Other one, well, they ask you to present to them a few projects, so you have to have a selection in mind.
Yep.
Third one, they're picking randomly, so you got to be prepared to say anything about any of them. And I think when you go and present them, it's important to say, of course, what role you had on that project, a brief description of the project. Here is the scope. What was, that was the client. Here is the scope, how much time we took, and whatever. And then maybe they could ask you, what was the biggest challenge on this project? What, something you really loved about it, or something that you can spontaneously share, I did CF for this project and I really had a great time working on that. It was really a fantastic experience, because then they can start seeing the nuance of your interest without asking bluntly, like, what are you interested in?
Right.
They could see it through a project that you've worked on. So it's super important.
And also, the portfolio will be facing upside down to you.
So you have to be able to do that and, find your guides wherever they are in a way that you're not used to seeing.
This is also why I'm not a fan of portfolios that are like 80 pages long. Like it's an interesting approach and like concept to a portfolio, but it doesn't work in an interview, because let's say they are choosing the pages and the projects, right? And they've chosen the 3 that you didn't want to talk about, and there's these other 3 that you really want to talk about. You can still, through the magic of presentation, guide them toward that direction. So they're open to project A, which you don't like, right? And you're talking about it, and then you sneak in there, oh, we also worked with a close team, and there's this other thing we worked on that was really great, and then you flip to that one, and they're like, oh, wow, that's actually a pretty cool project. Because a lot of them, some interviewers are so lazy, they don't even look at the whole thing. They kind of just quickly flip, and they just land on a page that they kind of like, but right after that, the next page has an amazing project, you won a competition. So that's where you also need to know your portfolio so well that you can flip roughly to the right page in an instant. And this is why having an 80-page thing doesn't work.
And you have to know it well in your mind too, because like you said, if they land on a project that you're not particularly keen on, or you don't have much to talk about, in your mind you have to be able to jump to a project that you like, in a very smooth way. So there is a lot of improvisation as well as preparation for the interview. It's kind of like you don't really know what the moment is going to be like, so you have to have different tools in your belt to be able to grab the right one at the right moment.
And your designs, the project, the experiences, whatever the stuff you're going to say, they need to be explainable and simple language to English language to the person that's sitting across from you. And this is where knowing the office makes a big difference. If they're a highly conceptual thing and all they care about is using Grasshopper and I don't know, whatever stuff, and you want to talk about that, then deep dive into that, man. But if they're not that, then you don't want to go super heavy in one direction or another if you're trying to get hired, period. And the other thing too is nowadays there are a lot more student projects that are not really about the design or the idea itself. It's more about an exercise that the students were forced to go through. And this is a whole another conversation we can have. But so I'll tell you right now, most offices don't really give a shit about that stuff, don't care about that stuff, because they've seen it before. It's like, great, this is the same like 9-cube whatever exercise we've been doing since 1985. Nothing new is here. Like, you have good skills, but there's a lot of people with good skills. So you should definitely keep that in mind. And let's see, design exercise. Yeah, you should definitely keep that in mind. Which reminds me also that the best way, I'm jumping down here, the best way to communicate information, period, for interview, for presentation, for talking, is through a story. You cannot simply list facts. You can't say, I was excited to do this. I did that. I did this. I want to do that. There has to be a story. There has to be a beginning and end of flow, and a beginning, middle, and end, ebb and flow. There has to be arc to it. It has to be engaging and exciting, because stories are, first of all, more exciting in the moment. They're more memorable, and they are more charismatic.
Well, so you have to be able to talk about a project in a very personable way. Yeah. So because it shows how much you are involved in it, and that's ultimately super appealing to an employer, because they want employees that are dedicated, passionate, and really into the work that they're doing.
And it's also a person that you want to be around. Like, no one wants to, I mean, maybe if you're around a bunch of engineers it's different, but mostly people don't want to just listen to someone spew out facts. It's not interesting. There has to be a story around it, and there has to be emotion and some humor. So, like, for example, I had this one project, and it was a team project, and it's a student project. I could easily say, okay, me and my friend, we did this competition, and we had other students help us. There were 10 other students, and then, we won the competition. Oh, wow. That sounds pretty good, but that's not very exciting. Okay, well, there's 2 of us, and then we decided that we needed more help because that was also part of the competition. So you got a professor to reach out to all the students he knew, and he said, do you want to become famous? And they responded, and then soon we had like 12 people showing up in the middle of the night, and we're in the lab, and we didn't have money, so we paid them with Taco Bell. Like, that's a fucking story, right?
You got to paint the picture.
And that goes for everything, and that's a really challenging thing to do, I know, but it's worthwhile to think about. For this and for everything else.
I mean, it is and it isn't, because it's just, being human, being sincere, being transparent, just say things the way they were, right? Yeah. You don't want to sound too dry. You don't want to sound like you're withholding information, or you're aware that you're just sharing some information and no others. Yeah. So I don't think it's hard. I mean, maybe for certain types of people it's more difficult, but
I think maybe it's because we we think that some of the more nuanced things that are totally unrelated to design and architecture are not relevant, and therefore we're not going to mention them. Like, for example, paying fellow students with Taco Bell and brewing coffee inside the computer lab and then flying to Chicago. I know all this stuff. Like,
but that tells you a lot about that person,
exactly.
Right? It tells you that person is respecting the work that the teammates are doing. That even if doesn't have the money, finds a way to make them happy, that there is a team spirit, that they're all in together. I mean, there is a lot to take out of that image. So maybe they really secretly love Taco Bell.
They're like, my dog was hit by a Taco Bell truck this morning.
The taco.
Okay, Taco Bell. Okay, so a few other kind of random notes. The big thing, this is one of the major takeaways of this conversation, especially for younger designers and young architects, is that you are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. And this is important to realize. One, it's 100% true. Two, it'll help with confidence. A lot of us are not very confident going into an interview, right? Because we're just not as experienced, maybe, and everything's against us. And also, so this will help with your confidence. This will also make you behave in a more mature manner and allow you to ask better questions in the interview. It's the best mindset to have. Yeah. Yeah,
and about questions, I would say that that's also on your to-do list to prepare. Yes. You have to have, for each office you're going to, you have to have specific questions you want to ask them. Mm-hmm. And this could be as simple as you go on their website, you pick one of their projects that you like, and you're going to ask them more information about it because you're interested in that project.
Yeah.
Right? It could be about you want to know more about their office. So you ask questions about what's the office culture? Like, what is the structure of your office? Do you have studios? Do you have, you want to show them that you are thinking about projecting yourself in their team and you are trying to get an understanding of their environment before maybe joining it.
And the thing is, when you have the mentality of that you are interviewing them, all of the holes in their office become really apparent. Because at the end of the day, even if they make you an offer, it's up to you to decide whether or not you work there. And most offices only do one interview, which is crazy that you do one interview for half an hour to an hour. Now
with two people out of like...
Yeah, now you're hired. It's absurd. So it's crazy from an interviewer's perspective, because it's like, how do I know if this person's going to work out? Less of a concern for them because they'll just fire if they don't like you. But as an interviewee, that's not a lot of time to really understand what you're getting into. That's why you have to come with questions.
It's like a speed dating, right? You got to find as much. It's detective work. You have to get as many answers as possible before you leave that place, because that will inform your decision. And if you said yes, but you only had a handful of information, you might regret it.
And if they don't ask the questions you expect them to, and they don't offer the information you expect them to, that you think they should as a good employer, that tells you something about them for sure. Are they respectful, right? Are they being disrespectful because you're younger? Have they pushed your interview around a bunch of times? Are they making inappropriate remarks? Are they staring at women as they go by? Like, these are true stories, and these are true stories that happened to me, and you need to be aware of them. You need to totally be aware of them. And another thing is, if they show you the office, if an interview goes well,
that's such a big one.
What will happen if the employer knows what they're doing is they will show you the office. They'll be like, this is Susan, this is Daryl, we have an open office, yada, yada, yada. That's a good sign. That's a really good sign. If they don't show you the office, either that means they don't know what they're doing, or they probably don't want you.
Or they are not even thinking about it. And you can also ask them, is it possible to, have a tour? I did that once.
It's a red flag to me if they don't show you the office.
I had offers from offices that I went to an interview and they didn't show me the office. I was like, okay. I went to a second interview there. Still didn't show me the office. Then they made me an offer. I'm like, look, man, I've been there twice. I still don't know where you're working, really. How am I supposed to say yes or no?
So
it's like you're buying a house without visiting it. Like, no one does that.
Yeah, that's where you have to be. you have to role play in preparation for this. You have to be both the interviewee and the interviewer. You have to think from both sides. And that's your job as an employee, as a human being anyway, to think from both sides always.
You have to think about satisfying them and satisfying what you're looking to know.
Yep. And that's where there's some big things that young designers don't ask in interviews, which is the stuff we want to know. We want to know, what kind of project am I going to work on? What are the hours like? That is a question everyone has. All the time. I know. A lot of people don't ask it because they're afraid if they ask it, it seems like they're not committed. Let me tell you. So if you're a young designer and you're afraid to ask this question because you don't want to seem like you're not dedicated, right? Think about this. What if you were applying and you're not a 25-year-old anymore? You're now 45. You've had a lot of experience and you have a wife and you have 3 kids and you got to support your kids, right? You're going to ask them, what are the hours like here and what am I going to be working on? Because I'm not going to commit to an office as a 45-year-old with my responsibilities and then suddenly have to work until 3 a.m. and everyone's a dick and I'm on a project I don't like, right? As an adult, I would ask these questions. What are the health benefits like? That's for further down the line. That's on the first interview. But these kinds of things that we all want to know, but the younger age professionals are afraid to ask. You got to ask them. You have to ask them.
You gotta ask them. You gotta ask what the hours that are, and if you've done your background check, and maybe you have friends who've been working in those places, or you've heard noise about what it is like for these offices. You probably already know, and you're gonna kind of double check that what they're saying is the truth or not. If they're like, oh yeah, the hours are from 9 to 6, and you know that everybody does all-nighters every day, that's a red flag because that means that's not good. I think the office culture, you can ask the office structure, I think is a big one. Knowing that there is only one project manager because it's a tiny office and that's going to be the person you're going to have to deal with. Well, that's a big one. Or if it's organized by studio, okay, what happens? Can I shuffle between studio? Am I attached to this studio forever? I've had experience where I work in studios, it didn't go well. And they would never move me to another one, and that's an issue. So just having a heads up on that. If you're a young architect, the AREs, like you're interested in being licensed, you want to know what they have to offer to help you do that. If they're like, it's on you, we don't help you, and you get an offer from another office you like that supports you on that, that might be in a play, for accepting the job or not.
Yeah, and the other thing is when you ask these questions, it shows the person across from you that you are mature, maybe even more mature than your age, but also that you're at least responsible in your throw and you're not afraid. The interviewer knows when they talk to a 25-year-old, if they say, do you have any questions? And they go, no. I know you have no experience. I know that you don't have any experience. You're timid or those things. And also you haven't thought of the questions. I know that. I 100% know that. If I ask a 25-year-old and they ask me all these things and some of them are maybe a little bit weird, I'm like, okay, this person is prepared. He's prepared for the interview, but it also tells me he's thinking about the other perspectives and other things to know. And when he goes to a client meeting, you can be sure he's going to be thoughtful in this way also, right? You don't want to hire someone who has no questions. That's a terrible thing.
And that's why you want to have different types of questions. Like we were saying, questions about project, question about
what's your design process?
Question about design process. Different types of questions just so you cover an array of things.
Yeah.
You also can ask if, they have a specific, like you said, they have a specific project or a specific team they're thinking on. And, and what after that project, like how do people get put on projects? That's also a question I asked many times because it tells you, are you hired just for that project? And if that project goes down, then what happens to you?
And the thing too...
And oftentimes they tell you that they don't hire on project basis, but everyone does.
This is a kind of more advanced level interview strategy. If there's something you're not sure about... So how do I explain this? On the one hand, you want to tell them what they want to hear. Right. If so, in their mind, they've already figured out, hopefully, like we need a person of this skill set, who's on this salary, who is this kind of personality, and who will want to work on this project, right? And whatever other things. They have this in the back of their minds. Ideally, you could mind read and you would know those things. You'd come in and be like, look, I am 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hire me, right? Well, short of mind reading, what you can do is just ask them, but you don't do it point blank. What do you want to be? What are you looking for in a candidate? You don't ask them that, but you ask more kind of conversationally or slyly things that they are interested in. I'm trying to remember. You have to phrase it in a way where they don't know that basically what you're doing is trying to find out what they want, and then right afterwards, again in a smooth and kind of hidden way, you tell them that you have exactly the skills, right? And I know it's kind of vague sounding, and I'm trying to remember how you do it exactly, but you kind of float out vague or more like objective questions. So instead of the conversation just being about like you and me, I'm going to tell you about me and you're going to ask about me, you kind of talk about the office and design and projects and management and staffing as this other object, like we talk as a conversation, right? This other thing between us, and we bounce things off of this to you. What do you think of this? And they say, we think about design this way. Then you, in response, say, oh, what a coincidence, because I think about design this way too. But you need to.
You got to be good at that, though.
You got to phrase it in a way where they don't know what's happening, and this is. And you can do it incorrectly, but most of the time, the interviewer, they won't know that this kind of circle of 3 items is happening, And that's a very, very good way to do an interview, right? You get them to talk about what they like, what they're interested, what they're looking for, and you just bounce right off of that, because now you're in a really good spot, as opposed to going in and having no idea what they're looking for.
Other things you could ask is, what program are they using? Like, I know at some point I switched job and I was really wanted to get deeply into Revit project. I've used Revit a little bit in school and really wanted to use it, working in an office. Mm-hmm. And that was, and that office I interviewed at was using Revit. So I actually asked them, is the project I'm going to be on is going to be on Revit? Like, I'm very interested in like getting into it, so they knew about that. Didn't quite happen the way it was supposed to, but that shows them like what you're interested in, and maybe if they're transitioning to Revit, they're going to think about putting you on because you're super motivated in learning it and diving into it.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, I think it's very important, and maybe more for women because I don't think it's a men's problem. When you ask what project you're going to be put on, be precise and ask them, okay, I'm going to be working on this house, but am I going to be doing architecture or am I going to be doing interior design? Because you would be surprised on how many times, I don't know for what reason really, they assume that you're a woman, you studied architecture, you graduated from architecture, you want to do architecture. They'll always find a way to stick you on interior design project. Yeah. And if you're not interested in that and you don't want to get into it more than you've been, you got to know and you got to voice it, because more than once, people who work on interior stuff are women, and they're, women who went to architecture school, and it's just super annoying.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
It's like, I love shopping, but it doesn't mean I want to be, picking the wallpaper of the kids' bathroom because that's not my thing. I want to draw like window details and figure out the thickness of the wall, and, I think it's important to be aware of it.
The other, I think, benefit to talking about things more objectively, like I was saying, is that it takes the pressure off of you, and it makes you less self-centered, and also I think more mature. A person who is younger is going to is more immature, will kind of just talk about themselves. Everything's first-person perspective. I like this, I like that, I don't like this, I like that. I want this experience, I don't have this experience. It's me, 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 me. A person who's older, who is in charge of running things, if they're good, they don't think that way. They kind of think about everything as pieces, as pieces on a game board, right? They see it from a higher level. They don't say me, me, me. They say, I think this is interesting that could go here. This person interacts with that person. This software is, I'm interested in it, but it seems like there's this other software that's good too. Yeah. It's a much higher level view. And
matured. It's
much more mature. And also it allows, again, the interviewer to bounce off of that. And you can talk, now you're having a conversation as a colleague about this other thing, rather than you just spewing out information about who you are. are.
You can be like, my window, my wall, it's not yours. It's not yours. Stop it. Stop it. Whenever.
What's that noise? Oh. Content. Huh, it's odd. My birth control is due. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Like whenever you work with people, and that happened many times to me, you have teammates and like, oh no, but I put my window here and like my wall there and my door. I'm like, it's not yours. It's not yours. You're not making it. You're not paying for it. You're not the boss. Like, this is not yours. It's not your house.
And the thing too is that form of communication feels very closed off. It's this way or that way because I'm saying about myself, right? Or the thing that I own. But if it's a shared thing, then it also conveys openness in that sense, right? Because then the employer knows, okay, I could visualize myself talking to this person at the coffee machine about their thoughts about architecture, project management, and it's not going to be always them saying, their stuff. So I think that's really good. Yeah. The other thing is you have to be prepared for different kinds of people at the interview. There are, in an office, there are project managers, there are designers, there are partners, there are technical people.
HR.
There HR might be present, yeah, that's true. And there are even the technical people, like draftsmen, construction, detailing, these kind of things. And there's also...
I had an IT guy once.
Yeah, even IT people. Yeah, I've had that too.
Which I didn't know. I didn't know who I had in my interview. And I was like, so I ended up talking about AutoCAD, Revit, and all of that. And and once I started working, I realized that guy was the IT guy.
Yeah.
I was like, interesting choice.
But
I guess that maybe the person who was supposed to be there couldn't, so they, put whoever was free that day. That's very funny.
Or the thing is, if offices are trying to make a software change, or especially if that's the case or not, they might consult their head of IT to say like, okay, we're trying to shift to Revit. We're going to interview this person. They say they have Revit experience. Can you sit in and kind of see what they say? And that person's opinion, even though they're just the IT person, might have a huge, role in whether or not you get hired because of that.
Yeah, because imagine you have a project with a team that doesn't know Revit, and you're highly experienced in knowing the program, and your work and what you're saying when you talk about the program is clearly like, one of your best skills, that you might be the ideal candidate.
That's where you need to know the people going in advance to kind of know who you're speaking with. Other quick thought with the portfolio is that don't be upset if they flip through it and that's the end of the portfolio review, right? If that happens and you feel like you didn't get to, again, go through the main points and you really want them to see something for a longer period of time than them just flipping through it in front of their lap, when you're speaking, you can suggest and say, maybe not suggest, but you can say like, this experience, that experience, when I worked on that project, it's in the portfolio. And that's enough to tell them that they should be going there, and they know it. They're smart enough, they know it. And if they don't go it, then leave it.
That could mean two things, that, if they don't spend much time on the portfolio, oftentimes it's that they already made their mind, in a way. They probably looked at it already and they made their mind. And it's either very good or very bad, right? It's either they already know that you're not the person, or they already know that you are like the one.
Portfolios are windows to the soul, baby. And you can tell whether or not a person has the right skill set super quickly. Especially if you're dealing with an employer, an interviewer who's looked at hundreds of portfolios, they just flip through it and they know already that roughly you fall into this realm of skill set. So don't be totally freaked out if that happens.
Let's talk about money.
Money.
How do you approach that? Like,
right.
Is it typically like they bring it up, you bring it up?
Speaking of which, we have a question that came in. All right. How much should you ask for when switching jobs, particularly from one city to another, that is generally seen as less expensive? For example, from Boston to Pittsburgh. I know there's a glass door, but that's hard to get a realistic idea because titles vary so much from firm to firm. That's definitely true. And factoring in, you generally want to make more money when you go from one place to another. Are there any other resources? We can answer that after we talk about it kind of generally. So yeah, you do have to have a number in mind, and that's tough.
You have to have a number in mind, and you have to have a higher number than what you ideally want to have.
Yes.
Because they're going to bring it down.
Yes.
So if you ask for like $30,
right,
well, you're probably going to get 20.
Right.
So just be aware of that margin. And typically, I feel like
I don't know if the margin is. Well, to be clear, I don't think you're saying the margin is 33%.
No, I'm saying there is going to be negotiation, and it's going to be negotiation down.
Yeah. So if you wanted to make $80,000 a year, I'd probably ask for certainly above 90. My feeling with asking, okay, so first of all, if you've never really had a job before, this is a really difficult thing to figure out. And there's two factors. One is kind of based on you, how much you need to survive. And that's difficult to do if you're like, a newborn adult. You don't know how much things cost.
But, I mean, you can make a spreadsheet with the expenses you have every month, like allocate, like making a budget, and then that will tell you how many plus taxes and how much a year you need to make. That's the first way to start.
Absolutely should. A lot of people don't, because it's a dumb, tedious thing, and it's Excel, and we don't like Excel. We don't like dealing with numbers and stuff. We just want to design. But you should do it, one, because it'll make a living easier, but two, that way you'll be able to skip over all the crappy offers that are way too low and go right next to the next step. So it's either you go to a place, get underpaid, go there, be there for like 6 months, a year, 2 years, and then move on to a job where you're being paid an actual decent salary. Right? You could do that, or you could just figure it out from the beginning and only go for the places that are going to pay you. And that's really advantageous. Again, subjectively, living, you can pay for food other than raw men. Also, that means now 2 years down the line, you don't have 2 years of interning title experience with shit pay. You have 2 years of salary experience, which means a lot in terms of confidence, could mean something on paper, and definitely means that when you apply to the next job, you ain't going to settle for less, right? And because salary increases are percentages annually, that makes a difference, after a period of time. It could make a difference, right? So
it seems like there is multiple ways to plan the number you're going to propose when time comes, right?
Right.
First, try and make that spreadsheet to see, what is the bare minimum that you need to live. Mm-hmm. Then do some research of what is your standard in your area for that industry, for that position. I think there was a website, I couldn't remember if it was through the AIA or NCARB, but it was per state or cities. They have some kind of database where, based on your level of experience and your locality, you can have somewhat of an idea of what salary should be. Yeah. Again, it's to take with needles, because it's not going to be super accurate. But between what you need, what this tells you, what Glassdoor might be telling you, what your friends are telling you, you should be able to have a good idea. And then, how much you think you're worth it.
Yeah, it's really, it's
very difficult because there's no standards there, and firms don't necessarily use a chart everywhere, that everybody follows. It's all very subjective. It's all very depending on people. And
yeah, the best thing is to talk to someone in the office. And a lot of places, I bet, you'd be surprised. I think it's total strangers who are at your level or slightly above or below you are actually pretty willing to meet up and have coffee with you. If you reach out to them and be like, hopefully they're a friend of a friend or something, or an acquaintance of acquaintance. I have an interview at your office. Would you be free to meet up, for coffee? I can ask you some questions. And at least in New York City, everyone's down to do that, and that's a great way. And you can probably ask about salary. I mean, I think sometimes we think that because people work at an office or teach at a school or they're partners at an office, that they're diehard, datum office for life. But step outside of the physical boundary of the office, and they are not, 99% of the time. So they're more than willing to kind of share their thoughts, especially if you could potentially be there. It's maybe I'd want to see if this person, The other thing is, so I always aim higher, and I think the fear is that you're going to ask for way too much and they're going to rule you out because of that. I don't have that concern. Do you have something to say to that?
Well, No, I mean, if they really want you, they're gonna try and find a middle ground to make you happy, make them happy. They still hire you. That's not, unless you're asking for $1 million a month. Like if it's possible, they will.
Yeah, the thing is, what I always say at an interview when I tell them how much I want, because they ask, and if they don't ask, then I don't bring it up. That's my other rule. In the interview, if they ask me how much I want to make, you have to have an answer. I think it's kind of bullshit, to be honest, that especially if you're interviewing at a very established firm and they have cash flow, that they're going to ask clearly someone who just graduated, right? Like the school you're just at, how much you want to make. It's a bit of a power move. It's like, can't you just like help me out and like pay me what I should be paid? But if they don't ask, I don't bring it up for the first interview.
You don't want to be burning bridges, and if that's like the next step in their selection phases of who they want to make an offer to, you don't necessarily need to bring it up. And also, you don't want to sound like that's what you're most interested in, is how much money I'm gonna make, in a way. So by bringing it up, you might sound like
I just want to bring it up if they don't ask. But the other thing I always said after telling them what I wanted,
I'm willing to negotiate.
No. You don't say that. No, you don't say that. What you say, but the most important for me is to find an office that I really like and do work that I'm passionate about.
Which basically means you're willing to negotiate.
It's a different thing, though. There's the subtleties in the conversation, and you say that, then they understand that if you shot high, that there's a little bit of wiggle room, but it also tells them very clearly, it's worthwhile saying out loud, these are my priorities. And if you're me, those are my priorities. If I ask for 95 and you give me 90, it's fine. I can deal with that. I mean, and because these other things, I don't want to be at a job I don't like. I don't want to do work I don't like. I don't want to work with people I don't like. You tell them these are things that really matter to you, then they'll say, yeah, totally. I get that. For us too.
The other thing with salary, if they don't bring it up at the interview, it might also be if it's a big office, because they're not allowed to. The people who interview you are not necessarily, the HR people are not necessarily in charge of discussing other employees' salary. So I would follow your advice, and I wouldn't bring it up if they don't.
All right, let's burn through this because I want to get this done. Some common questions that come up are, they will ask, all offices ask almost, why do you want to work at our office? Name some projects you like. And I always hated that question. I thought it was super arrogant, but they ask the question, so you have to have projects in mind. You have to know everything about them. You have to be able to, name a few different kinds of things depending on who's in the room, and et cetera. They will ask you what your goals are. You have to know that. They will ask about salary. They will ask about the responsibility you've had on other projects, your weaknesses and strengths, the classic interview questions. And then if they ask you about software, here's a very specific point. I would convince them that you know the software even if you don't. Now, here's where the line between honesty and lying becomes a little bit blurred. Here's the thing. At this point in time, a lot of people interviewing, and this will change soon, are from a generation where they did not go to school with computers and they don't know how to use a lot of the programs we use. We're talking about the upper level management. And 10 years from now, it's not going to be the case. But that's the case right now. So any concerns they have about software that they know they have to cover, but they don't fully understand that realm, it's like black magic to them, you convince them you can do it, right? You don't lie outright and say, yeah, I have 10 years of doing Revit management experience, and you don't. But if you have used Revit a few times and you're a little familiar with it, you don't tell them, I've used Revit once. You say, yeah, I have Revit experience. I also have experience doing X, Y, Z's, A, B, C, D programs. I'm so confident I can get right back into Revit or do other things. Not a problem. And for the older generation, right, they're like, okay, I buy it. I buy it because all the young kids learn computer software and new phones and new technologies way faster than me. I get it.
Yeah, you don't want to unsell yourself, right? You want to sell yourself. And I actually had this question happen to me like many times. Like, do you know how to use Revit? I was like, well, haven't used it professionally, but I've learned it in school. I had to learn this program in a previous job, and I learned it by myself in a couple of weeks. And as you can see in my portfolio, I'm good at it. So, I'm totally confident in it. The one thing I wouldn't lie about or oversell yourself is if they ask you, have you done construction administration before?
Yeah. Well, that's a different thing. Yeah. Well, there's like liability involved.
No, but like if you don't even know what a submittal looks like, or like what an RFI is, like don't. There is a certain level of like things that you can pretend and things that you shouldn't pretend and if you don't, it's totally fine. I mean, they're not going to expect you to know everything about everything. About the job description, you put down that if you don't know what position you're interviewing for, don't be too specific, because you don't want to put yourself in one box versus another. And I think that's a very good point. Sometimes offices interview because they need more people, but they don't necessarily mention what they're going to use these people for. And like I said, you don't want to be stuck doing interiors if at the end they wanted to hire just an architectural designer of any kind. Or you don't want to get stuck doing like SketchUp modeling if you're interested in doing CA.
I kind of talked about offices as being a puzzle, and everyone in there ideally is the perfect puzzle piece to fit in that office. And that's almost never ever the case, which is crazy to think that offices don't have more turnover. There's a lot of turnover, but there isn't more, because there's absolutely not a
unhappy people too.
Yeah, round pegs in a square hole. So when you go to the interview, you're kind of, on the one hand, you want to find out what's up so you know what you're getting into, right? What is the shape of the puzzle piece that you're looking for? Because I might not be in that shape. At the same time, you also want to be malleable so that in the process of the interview, you come across as being this puzzle piece that they've been trying to find. It's a weird kind of balancing act that gets executed in the nuances of conversation. So that's difficult to do, but that's why you have practice interviews. Don't be afraid to throw in more or less unrelated things in the conversation. Everyday life. You want to be a person. You're not a robot with stats. You want to be a person. Know what kinds of projects you want to work on, because that might come up.
They might also ask you, why are you wanting to leave your current office?
They will definitely ask that, yeah.
And you have to be prepared for it. And again, don't talk bad about your current office, because
that's
that won't help you.
Never talk bad about a previous employer unless you are on your own and you don't give a frijoles anymore.
But like if you're saying, well, look, I've been doing basically the same task for the past 3 years and I want to evolve in my career and grow as an architect, then they'll totally get that. If you're like, I've been doing mostly technical things and I'm really more interested into like the design process, and I think your office has a great approach to that, then they will say, okay, well, that makes complete sense and we're the great fit for that. And at the same time you throw a little compliment right there, like kind of hidden.
Yes.
And they would always love that. And
you're not making it about the previous employer. You're making it about just what it is. It's been explained that hopefully clearly that they were a smaller office, right? And you wanted to go to a place where there could be more growth or work on bigger projects. That's enough. They get it. Small offices a lot of times can't do big projects. They don't have a lot of things, right? Often. So you're not making it about any one person. You're just making it about the facts. This is the fact. It's just the reality of things. And
at the same time explaining why this fact, you're explaining them that this fact is, and why they are the right solution to, solve that fact, basically.
Miscellaneous things. I would wear a watch so you can keep track of time. Time does a weird thing in an interview.
Turn off your phone. You don't want your grandma to be calling you during the interview or your alarm to go off. So, shut that baby down.
But a watch is helpful because then you can track how much time you have left to go.
They might ask you, are you interviewing anywhere else?
This is a good one,
And if you are, you gotta let them know the world wants you, baby.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is something that if they ask you, it's actually a really, really good thing that they ask you. And this is also where having practice interviews beforehand are great.
And that also shows them, you could be like, I'm interviewing in a few places. I'm really trying to find, the right fit and finding the right place. So, so that they understand that. You don't want to be like, no, I'm not. No, I'm only interviewing here because then it's like, okay, who's the weirdo?
Yeah, no, don't do that. And I also would try and find a way to suggest or make clear through suggestion that you have offers.
You can and
don't say I have other offers for this amount of money. You don't even say I have other offers, but you have to find your own language that works. It could be like, there's some...
And the way to kind of get into that is to ask them, well, they might ask you, what's your timing? Like, are you available tomorrow? Did you just give your, your notice and you have to stick in your office for another month or two? Like, they might ask you that. Or you can ask them, when are you looking to... what's your schedule on this project you're looking to get people on? Mm-hmm. So then they would give you an idea of like, well, we're interviewing a few people, we're hoping to make a decision by the end of the month. Yeah. Therefore,
Right.
And you don't want to give notice that you're leaving your office until you have an offer.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And I wouldn't, if you're currently working, it is a good look to say to the interviewer that, because they might express that they want someone immediately, and if they show that they're quite interested in you, you would still say like, look, I've been with this office for X number of time. I want to do right by them. I don't want to just leave them. So it would be at least a couple of weeks. And if they say, well, then we can't have you, you do not want to be at this future place anyway.
Because they're just staffing you for that particular task they need you on, and they don't care about who's doing it.
And that's the other thing too. You have to try and figure out why they're hiring. Is this an emergency hire? Are they hiring for short-term and long-term? What's their thinking? How mature are they as an employer? And also, as a potential employer, I don't like to hear that this person's just going to ditch their office that they've been at for the last 4 years to come work for me and the next day. Like, either that says something really bad about that office, but it also says something a little weird about this person. It's not good either way, right? And all you want is positivity. And so 2 weeks, it's totally reasonable.
2 weeks notice. And and I think, it's normal and it's courteous to just give people a time to turn around and find somebody to replace you if you leave. That happened to me before. Like the same thing, I got an offer and they wanted me to start as soon as possible, and I'm like, look, I've been with that office for a couple of years. I'm the only one on this project. I can't just leave those guys like this, because we all know that when that person leaves the office, they leave with all the knowledge of that project. You need time to offload all of this information to other people. And
if you do that, you've burned a bridge. It's not good.
You can also ask them, how long is this position for?
They're not going to say it's a 1 year hire. What I do say a lot of times is that I'm looking for a place that I can be at in the long term, because I like hearing that. They don't want to invest in someone that haven't bounced in 6 months. And then you do.
Yeah, and you can also make sure that, it's a full-time position.
Well, yeah.
About the salary too, sometimes, if you go on Archinect and people have posts, sometimes they mention
go on the Archinect forum, ask the question.
Architectural designer starting at $60,000 a year. Yep. And you can check the post that you're not even applying to, just to see New York, there is 10 offices that are listing jobs right now, and some of them are mentioning this salary, that salary, that salary. Right. Gives you an idea.
Only the last 2 points. There's a lot more to say, but we're running out of time. And I think we're going to do... Well, if you have questions, then just reach out to us at the hotline, 213-222-6950. Call or text. If you're listening right now and you have a question, just text it or call it right now, and then we'll answer it on one of the upcoming episodes. But the other thing is... You need to inspire confidence, and you need to be relaxed, and you need to be kind of yourself. And that's difficult to be yourself and relaxed and all of these things, but that's the thing you have to try and aim for. And the last thing I always say at an interview, no matter what, is I really want to work here. I like your office. I know that it's on paper, it's obvious because you went to the interview. It's obvious you spoke with him for an hour. It's obvious because you were nice and you were amicable. But there's some value in just saying it directly. I really like your office. I've wanted to work here for a while. I appreciate this or that about you, and I really look forward to hearing from you. It's And the times I've interviewed where I've forgotten to say it because you're running out the door or whatever, I'm always like, damn it, I wish I said that, because I am convinced that has a lasting impression, because I also think a lot of people don't do that. Because the end of the interview is awkward. It's like, you went through this madness, or you don't know how much time has passed.
It's awkward, and you have to go back to work, and it's a lot.
And then you're on your way out, and you went through this whole performance, this whole life, this whole experience, and boom, it's done. Now you're walking out the glass door of the conference room.
You got to give the applause before you leave.
You have to have closure to it, and that's the best way to close an interview.
The one thing I do usually right after I'm done with an interview, before going back to work or on my way back to work if I'm in the subway, I write down everything I could remember from that interview. Like, so and so did that, they said that about my portfolio, this is like, how the office is structured. Like, try to write everything you can remember, because if you are in an intense interview time, everything get like mixed with each other. Offices become the same, and you lose information, you forget things, and it is about the subtlety of what you can remember at the time you need it.
The nuances.
So have a notebook with you that you won't show to your coworker or your office, where you write down every single thing. The time you met, the time the interview started, the time you got off the door. Look at that back. Like, okay, I've been there for 10 minutes. That's not a good sign. Well, I've been there for an hour and a half. Wow, hello. And
on the way out, say goodbye to your new friend, the receptionist. And because, again, that is the person you're going to reach back to. They are the gatekeeper. And
make sure you ask your interviewers their information. They have a business card. You want their business card. You want their name, their email address, because you want to follow up with these people if you don't hear back from them. And ideally, you don't want to have to go back through the receptionist again. You want to follow up directly with them. So make sure you get that.
For me, their direct contact information should be offered. And if it's not offered, I take that as a sign. Like, so ideally, yes, you want that information.
It could be, do you guys have a business card?
But yeah, I suppose. Yeah, no, it's fine either way. I'm just saying that if you don't ask for it and you let the situation play out, you need to let the situation play out, because whether or not they offer or don't offer is information for you. You know more about the office and whether or not they're interested in you, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, if you know it didn't go well, then don't even bother, right? But like when I started interviewing, sometimes people's names I didn't understand what it was, or I just know their first name but not their last name, and their name is like Bob, and there is like 6 Bob in the office, and their profile, there is no profile pictures on their website. How do I know which Bob is who? So I think it's fine to ask for a business card.
And then afterwards, go out and get a Starbucks coffee and rejoice in the fact that you are now going to get a new job.
And change clothes before you go back to the office.
Change clothes before you go back to that. So this whole process, it takes some time, it takes some effort. And that's, again, why I don't know if I would do 2 interviews in a day. I don't think you have time for it or the energy for it.
It's a lot of brain power.
It is a lot of brain power, especially if you include the whole thing from, sneaking clothes out and changing and whatnot, and all the way down to sitting on a bench and taking notes before you have to go back to the office. But I think we covered quite a bit. I'm sure there's more. And
each interview helps you prepare better for the next one. So it's good to have some some downtime in between each other to kind of rethink and retweak and perfect your performance.
Yes, performance. All right. Again, the hotline. You should text, call us, Instagram us, whatever, if you have questions about this, or if you have some advice that you want to share on here, or you have a story about someone that you interviewed or a place that you interviewed at that you didn't care for and you want to voice it. This is the way to do it.
Well, I hope that this was helpful. I mean, I think we tried to cover a lot of things. I'm sure we could keep going on for a bit longer.
If you like our conversations, you please leave a review. I know we ask every week, and I kind of hate asking, but it's something that supports the show and lets us know that we're doing well. I mean, we get a lot of listens, but the reviews are tough to come by. And if you can do that, that'd be really great. And again, join the community, join the conversation, and let us know what your thoughts are. We're on iTunes, Spotify. This one will be on YouTube as well.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave us a comment, like the video if you like it. Click on the bell to make sure that you get notified every time we post something.
And let's see, we're on all the social medias. We're frequently in ARC daily. We're now our tips and tactics guides are kind of like officially listed in the study architecture segment as resources. So we're quite happy about all of that. And thank you for listening, because of course if we were doing this and no one was listening, then I guess maybe we'd still do it, but the fact that you're listening really is what defines the show, and we appreciate it a lot, absolutely. And we see all of your messages and your likes and various things, all the different platforms, and it's really great.
And feel free to share our snippets of video, screenshots on Instagram stories, hashtag the Midnight Charette. The more you spread it, the bigger we will grow. So.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You always make everything I say sound weird.
No.
Yeah, you always make it a turn.
All right. Well, okay. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will talk to you next week or sooner. Bye.
Bye-bye.